Oh
that one's
God.
drilled deep to right field.
Hurts going deep for it all. Devontae Smith.
He has been fantastic in this fourth.
Wow.
A break in on goal, and he scores.
Back, everybody, to Two Mics All Sports. I'm your host, Zach Shaby, joined by my co-host, Joe Bro. What's going on, man?
So, Zach, how you doing?
I'm good, can't complain. So today we're going to give you guys a little bit of a different episode, but at the same time, something relatable to a topic. We're going to give you guys our 2025-2026 free agency predictions. So we're going to give maybe about like 15, 20 players and just give our ultimate predictions on where we have them going and the impact they make and why we have them going to that team. So first and foremost, we're going to start off with JT Realmuto. We both have him going back to the Phillies. I think it's pretty self-explanatory why. Joe, just why do you have him going back to the Phillies? Because I think we have the same reason, but just why do you have him going back?
It's a position that Phillies really don't have built up within their clubhouse and their young guys in their organization. Yes, they have Stubby and Marchand, but they're not at that caliber yet to be as big of an influence as Realmuto is on this team. And I think he's not signing any big money. He's getting older. His bat wasn't really there this season, but he could still sling it behind the plate. So I think he will ultimately just re-sign with the Phillies, maybe a 2-year deal, and then maybe retire after that.
Yeah, I pretty much agree. That's kind of like the same sentiment that I have. The Phillies, we really have no one better than JT, so it makes no sense to just let him go. The only reason I would kind of let him go is if you can get a guy like maybe Adley Rutschman in the trade market. But even then, I would love to still have him back, even if we trade for a guy like him. Because JT, yes, he's getting up in there in age, but he's still one of the best, if not the best, defensive catcher in the entire league. He has a subpar bat, but he kind of had a subpar bat when he came here with the Phillies. It's just gotten worse as the time has gone on. But at the end of the day, he's the best option you have. He can mentor the next guy that you want to bring in here as the future catcher. And for him, there's really no one where else I think he can fit. Like he's been here he's been here for a while. He fits the system. He knows this system, and I think for both parties it would work out pretty well. So, but then we're going to move on to some first basemen. We're only going to talk about two in particular because these are probably like the two biggest market ones. So, Joe, let's talk off with Pete Alonso. You have him returning to the Mets. Why?
Same thing as Realmuto. He's still a great bat, but defensively he's not there. So I feel like the Mets might let him walk based off his defensive play, but Pete Alonso is basically the showman of the Mets. He embodies the Met culture. I feel like if he wants to sign for less money to try helping their franchise and compete for a World Series next year. So I think he's just going to stay with the Mets just because he has a built-in time and relationship with them.
Yeah, I think for both parties, it would make sense in a sense, but I think Pete Alonso is going to want big money. And I just think the Mets, we'll see future that you think they're going to spend money. I also think they're going to spend money on a lot of players, so they might not want Pete Alonso because that defense has been a big void in his entire Mets tenure, and it's cost him a lot, but then he's also made up with his bat. But I have him going to the Cleveland Guardians, and I'm going to explain to you why. Cleveland was pretty much dead in the water in the season last year, towards the very end. They got hot quick, and we're a win away, or we're very close to beating the Detroit Tigers and moving on to the division series. And they were in the championship series the year before that. I think they need another bat in this offense. J. Rams had to carry so much. Steven Kwan's not a home run hitter. He's a guy who can get you singles, doubles, triples. He hits for a high average, is what I'm saying. And Pete Alonso, getting him at first base. Even Josh Naylor, he was great when they had him, but then they traded him to the Diamondbacks, and you can see that void it left there. I think Pete Alonso in that stadium, the way he hits the ball, I think he'd be great. You put him ahead of J-Ram or even behind J-Ram to protect J-Ram. I think between those two that be a good offense. And I think Cleveland they need that much needed bat that can be help out J-Ram when he's not having it or even when Steven Kwan's having it. It just feels like they don't have that bat that can get them over the top against these teams. And I'm not saying even the Detroit Tigers have it. They just have such a balanced offense. That's why they beat them. But I think Cleveland, needs that one more big bat in their offense, and I think Pete Alonso would fit perfectly. So mentioning, like I said, Josh Naylor, you also have him returning back to his team in the Seattle Mariners. Why?
Just because Seattle is looking for that extra edge. They had it this season. Unfortunately, they lost to Toronto. I feel like they're gonna try running it back. Naylor was big for them even after the injury midway through the season, and I feel like that Naylor could be that deciding factor for them maybe going to the World Series next season.
Yeah, no, I agree definitely. He was a huge acquisition for everyone highlighted the Eugenio Suarez move that they made, but Josh Naylor's move was very under the radar and it made a big impact. He was one of their best bats in the postseason, and I think him going back to Seattle would be great. But I actually have him going to the Cincinnati Reds. I think Cincinnati, they need that guy at first base. They have Ellie De La Cruz. They have all these other, like Matt McLean, Tyler Stevenson behind the plate even. I just think they need that guy at first base that they know what they can get out of him because they just haven't had that really since Joey Votto retired, if you realistically think about it. And putting him right there, he's not going to be as great, obviously, but just having a guy that you know what to expect out of a first base, I think, does wonders to his team. And Cincinnati literally made the playoffs last year. Terry Francona did an amazing job going in there with Cincinnati. And now bringing in a guy like Josh Naylor that Francona is familiar with, I think would do wonders for both him and the team as a whole. So that's why I have him going to Cincinnati. But let's move on to some second basemen. First, let's talk about Gleyber Torres. Me and you both have him leaving the Tigers. You have him going to the Giants. Tell me why.
I feel like there's a void, an identity crisis going on in San Fran. I feel like that Torres going there can help them. So I feel like that there's a big hole for second base. I think he just fits it perfectly for them, for their style of play.
Yeah, I think he'd be great there. Obviously, they brought in a guy like Willie Adames last year, and he started off hot, had a really cold stretch, but then finished the season off strong. I think Gleyber could do the exact same thing for them, but I have him going to a team more like Washington. The way I see Gleyber Torres is he had a great season. He had an okay season with the Tigers, not one of his best, obviously. If I'm a guy like him, you just had the Tigers, you made the playoffs. Go to this team like Washington and try to reset your market even. Maybe sign a one-and-one contract of 1 year and then be able to opt out on this for the second year. Go play amazing in Washington. You're not going to get the recognition maybe, but if you play well and put up a good batting average and maybe hit 20 to 25 home runs, you could set yourself up for a 3-4 year contract that next offseason. I think Washington is the perfect place to go because they need, with a young team like that, a new manager, the youngest manager in MLB history they brought in. I think that veteran guy in there to help them and just honestly, for his perspective, reset his market. Go play well in Washington and then go get yourself a good contract after playing well the next season. But then we're going to talk about Jorge Polanco. We both have him going back to Seattle. Is your still same reasoning with Josh Naylor and why Jorge Polanco should go back to Seattle?
Yeah, same reasoning. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Obviously, the Phillies been running that for the past few seasons, but that's because they didn't address major issues in the bullpen that they needed to address. But I think Seattle has a good team. They just ran into a hot Toronto team. So I just think that this, like I said before, Polanco really fit in with the energy in Seattle, and he's a good bat for them.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. And he also had one of his better seasons last year with Seattle. Obviously, he got traded from Minnesota the previous offseason, had a terrible season, but then he was able to rebound this year and be one of their best bats. And a loaded offense like that, you realistically think about it. We think about this, yes, Seattle lost. They were one George Springer home run away from facing the Dodgers in the World Series. And who knows who's to say they don't win that series against the Dodgers because their offense was loaded. They have amazing pitching. Their bullpen can be shaky, but it's usually one of the best when it's good. Who's to say they maybe add a few pieces there and a few pieces there? They're right back where they were this year, actually in the World Series. I think this is a great team. Run it back as much as possible. And Jorge Polanco is not too old that you can have him at second base. And I don't think he's going to play as well as he did last year because he played incredible last year. But I think bringing him back, just that more veteran guys, because they have a Rosarena, they have Josh Naylor. I don't think they'll have Suarez. I think that's for sure. J-Rod, and then obviously Cal Raleigh, who's probably going to be the American League MVP. It's just like you have a good team right here. Try not to break it up as much as possible. I think it's more retooling more than like blowing it up and rebuilding, I think, because you still have a good nucleus around this team. So, but then let's talk about a guy who was in the World Series, didn't play really up until the World Series, Bo Bichette. You have him going back to the Blue Jays. I also have him going back to the Blue Jays. Is it more that you don't think he has a market out there, or you just think the Blue Jays at him make the most sense?
I just don't think there's that much market other for him, like everywhere else other than Toronto. He didn't have that stellar of a season, and I just feel like he might want to ask for too much, but then might have to realize that he's not going to get that much money anywhere else. A lot of teams have such shortstops that they don't really need, so that position's not really a hole for much teams this season.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way. I think he will get a decent contract from Toronto. I think it'll be a multi-year contract, but at the same time, it was a tough season for last year between bad play and just injury riddled. I just think Toronto and him makes the most sense. He goes to another system after having the season he did. I just think it won't really mesh well. And Toronto's the perfect place to be. Toronto was another team. They had the World Series in the bag. Like that. Don't get me wrong. That was an amazing World Series, but it's a World Series I think Toronto should have won. And he was a big piece in Game 7, hitting that huge 3-run home run off Shohei Ohtani. So when he's healthy, he has an amazing bat, and he's a great defender. And him and Vladdy are kind of the foundation pieces that's built Toronto to this winning team they are right now. So I think keeping Bo Bichette around would be the realistically good decision. But also at the same time, I don't think much market he'll have. And I think Toronto and him will reach an agreement because it works out for both parties. So... But then we're going to talk about some big third basemen. Obviously, both these guys were playing on different teams this year. One got traded at the deadline and one stuck it out throughout the whole season. We're going to talk about Alex Bregman and Eugenio Suarez. So you have Bregman going to the Mets. Is that correct?
Correct. And there's a lot of these guys, free agents, that I have going to the Mets, as you'll see later on in the predictions. That doesn't mean that they're going to sign there. These are just what I feel like personally fits the roles in the team best. But I feel like Bregman, yes, I want Bregman going to the Phillies. Like I'm sure you are too. Have your prediction in there but they're not going to spend the money on him. Like, will he be a good fit? I think absolutely for the Phillies, but they're going to try sticking it out with Boone. They're not. They're going to try getting him up and then maybe trade Boone later in the year for value. But the Mets are willing to spend that money, like you've seen with Soto in the years past. They're not afraid. They're like them and the Dodgers. They're not afraid to waste their money to go get these all-stars. They could be a swing and a miss like Soto was this season for them, but they're not afraid to spend the money.
Yeah, and I agree with the Mets and stuff like that. But the reason I had the Tigers, because I'll be honest with you, I had both these guys between Bregman and Suarez fit so much in Detroit with what they're able to do. But at the end of the day, I chose Suarez just like you did because I think Suarez, he was a great bat last year. The Tigers, they're a young team. I think they would love to spend money because they have a manager who's won a World Series and has connections with Bregman, hence why I also think Bregman could go to the Tigers. I just think don't have to spend that much money on Suarez. He could be a great veteran piece you throw in at third base, and he has experience in the clubhouse with Detroit because he's been there before. So put him at third base. Don't have to give him that much of a contract. Maybe a 2-3 year contract that's maybe not even over $20 million a year. He was great last year. You don't expect much out of him, and he could be a great piece that could project you guys even more. Maybe finally get you guys back to a championship series, which would be huge for this Tigers team right now. But then obviously, I'm going to mention it with Bregman. You have him going to the Mets. I have him going to the Phillies. I want Alec Boehm out of this city. I don't want to ever see his face in a Phillies uniform again. But Bregman, as you see later in this video, I think for the Phillies at this point, I'm hoping. I don't think it's going to happen. This is why I'm giving the prediction, but I don't think, knowing Dombrowski, it's a very likely chance this doesn't happen. I think the Phillies are either getting one of the two guys, Alex Bregman or Kyle Tucker, and I'm going with Bregman here right now. So I think Bregman will sign with the Phillies. I think we'll throw him enough money. And Bregman's still an amazing player, and he fits the timeline of this Phillies baseball team. You throw him at third base. He's an amazing defender. His bat is great. Imagine his bat in this stadium. He's going to hit, he could hit 30, 35 home runs at that 4-hole. He could be the guy protecting Bryce Harper. He could be the 4-hole. If you bring back Schwarber, it could be Schwarber, Turner, Harper, and Bregman. That 4 right there, if they actually play up the par, could be great. And I just think If the Phillies believe they still have this window open, go actually spend some money. Stop saying all this crap. Get rid of Bohm, get rid of Castellanos, and go get guys that actually fit this team and can help you win. But next, we're going to talk about some center fielders. We have 3 big ones on the market. Obviously, we're going to talk off with the biggest one, Cody Bellinger. We both have him returning to the Yankees. Do you think it's because, all right, just tell me why you have him going back to the Yankees. Go ahead.
He found his spot there, especially after he went cold for a little bit in Chicago. So I think after the amazing start he had in LA, he found him. That looked like his LA Dodgers self playing in New York. So I think he's just gonna stick it out. I don't see why he would change it up. New York pays their players, so I think he's just gonna accept the money that they get and hopefully try run a playoff.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That's my same reasoning why I have him going back to the Yankees. This was his best season with the Yankees since probably his 2019 MVP year with the Dodgers. He was really good. He's a great defender. He just fits that ballpark to a T. You stick him back out in center field, and I think he'll be an amazing fit with them. His lefty bat just works well in there. His defense is great. It's a perfect fit on both sides. It's pretty self-explanatory. But then we're going to move on to Harrison Bader. Obviously, one of the most more surprising players in the second half after he landed in Philly. You have him returning back to the Phillies. Do you think I'm going to ask you this question again. Do you think he's going to have any market, or you just think him and the Phillies make the most sense together?
I think him and the Phillies make the most sense together. I think the Phillies will realize his impact coming toward down the later stretch of the season and how big an injured Harrison Bader did for them in the playoff series against the Dodgers. He was out. That was basically your speed. And then you're going to have Crawford coming out there this season because he's going to come up this year. Either it's going to be at the beginning of the season or a couple months in. So you stick Bader in center, Crawford in left, and I'm sorry, but Castellanos is not sticking around this season. So I think Rojas has been killing it down in the winter leagues. You stick him in outfield, you're looking at a no-fly zone. Maybe a platoon with Marsh out there, but they have young guys that can come up, and I think Harrison Bader could help them make sure that they cover all parts of the outfield.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense for him to come back. He was so great with us and stuff like that. I love him coming back. I actually do think he's going to have a market, though, and I think he'll land in Kansas City. Kansas City really needs help in the outfield. And losing Anthony Santander was bigger than they thought it was going to be, him going to Toronto. And I think they need that defensive guy, and Harrison Bader makes the most sense there. He shows that he still has a good bat, and going into his 32 season. And I just think him and the Royals make a lot of sense. Yes, I would love to see him back in Philly, but I think he's going to have a little bit of a market and price himself out. But then hopefully this leads the way for us bringing up Justin Crawford. And either way, I think he should be starting no matter what. But if Bader goes and Crawford just takes his spot, I think it's pretty simple. So, and then the final center fielder, Trent Grisham. You have him going back to the Yankees. Why?
Just the fact that there's a lot of other big outfield names this season in free agency. And I just don't, he'll get outsigned by Bellinger. So I think that he will just end up re-signing with the Yankees on a low market deal and then maybe get traded at the deadline for more money, or even sign like a 1-year contract just so he gets away from all these bigger names that are coming out of free agency this year, because teams are going to spend their money on the Kyle Schwarbers, the Alex Bregmans, Kyle Tuckers, Diaz, Dylan Cease. Teams are going to spend a lot of money this year in free agency. So if you take a year, play for the same team for a low amount of money, then you can go get and you prove yourself. You get more money next year when teams' markets open up a little bit more.
Yeah, I think that's actually a great thing, but that's kind of the reasoning why I have him going to the Mets, actually going across from New York. Mets, when they tried to they had a big hole at center field between Tyrone Taylor in the first half and then trying to fill it with Cedric Mullins in the second half. It was just terrible overall, and I think Trent Grisham, putting him out there in center field, he's a great defender. He gives some life to that Mets offense, which I think would be huge for them. And I just think he would make the most sense there. A 1-to-1 opt-out contract, I think, is perfect for a guy like him because he had a great season with the Yankees last year. But I think, like you said, it's going to be overshined just because how this free agent class is loading up when it comes to outfielders and just outfielders who hit in general. And I think low contract for him with a new team, I think, would be the perfect fit. So, but then we're going to talk about the DHs. We're going to talk about Kyle Schwarber and then Munetaka Murakami. First, we're going to talk about Schwarber. You have Schwarber going to the Cincinnati Reds. Why? You there? All right, we'll get Joe's prediction in a second, but I'll start off with the Phillies. Why I have him returning to the Phillies. Like I mentioned, I have Bregman signing with us, so I think Schwarber would make sense coming back to us. And I just think overall, Schwarber, he was great last year. He's going to have a market without a doubt 100%, but just Schwarber in this ballpark, he's great. He loves the city as a whole, and I think Schwarber being here is just the perfect fit. He's going to get a good contract, I think, and then with him coming back and us getting Bregman, I think that's the perfect. But now, Joe, with you being back, why do you have the Schwarber going to the Reds? You're on mute.
He's from Cincinnati. I feel like you saw what they did last year, brought out his dad to throw out the first pitch. It's a hometown thing. So I think the Phillies, he's a high market guy. We got to face the facts. And then you just got to also look, you brought in all these big bats to hit in the playoffs, and you saw how that worked out for you at the end of last season. So I think, yes, you'll get these guys like Schwarber or like and Harper, Real Muto, even though he's still a big target guy. They're all power hitters. You need contact. You need to get people on base for them. So I feel like that's why you have your Crawford coming up. That's why you sign Kyle Tucker, which I have going to them later in this prediction video. I just don't think the Phillies have that for him yet.
Yeah. I think that's definitely like reasonable and such because Schwarber, like, he's played so well, and it just seems like no one else really, like, he's the guy overshining everyone else in the regular season because he's the only guy that really is your mainstay in the offense. But I just think at the end of the day, like, yes, I honestly think it's just a race between us and the Reds. I think that's the teams he's ultimately going to go to, but I think it will be interesting to see what will ultimately happen. But then we're going to talk about Munetaka Murakami, who is officially posted and can sign with any team in this 50 window period. You have him going to the Dodgers. I can kind of guess why, but go ahead.
Yeah, Team Japan. So far, everybody who's from that team decided to go to the Dodgers. Ohtani went there in his free agency from the Angels. Then, obviously, Sasaki went there. Then the big guy, Yamato went there, even after getting more money from Philly offered. So I just think that the West Coast, he's definitely got into a West Coast team. It's closer to home. And obviously the Dodgers have that connection with the Japanese players. So I think it's just an easy fit for him to just go into and at least start his season. I don't see the Dodgers starting out another 10-year, $300 million like they've been doing in years past for these pitchers, but a nice little 4-year deal so where you're at with us, and then maybe in a couple of years we'll sign you for another 6 years. But his numbers, obviously, they call him the Japanese Kyle Schwarber. So his numbers are good, but those are only against. You don't know how they're gonna collaborate toward Major League when he comes across.
Yeah, like I said, I wouldn't even be surprised if he went to the Dodgers. It makes most sense. It makes the most sense for a guy like him. But I actually have him joining the Chicago Cubs. One of the main reasons why is I think they're gonna lose their DH/like main player in Kyle Tucker. I'm gonna mention that later in this video, and I just think Murakami would fit great there. They actually have Seiya Suzuki, so a guy he knows pretty well, and I think with his bat in Chicago and Wrigley Field, I think it'd be great. He's that DH that I feel like they could need and like really need at the end of the day, and it just makes sense. I think the Dodgers make the most sense because it's West Coast, but then have Chicago because, yes, I think they're losing Kyle Tucker, but also will be a great fit in Chicago. But now we're going to talk about our biggest slide so far. We're going to talk about the 4 Premier League pitchers that are going to be free agents this year. Let's start off first with Philly's own Ranger Suarez. You have him signing with the Mets. Go ahead.
Yeah, the Mets need help with their rotation. They don't really have that caliber ace. As you could say, and I think Ranger proved himself in the playoffs on why he could be that number 1 or number 2 guy. And obviously in Philly, he's more of our number 3 or 4, especially with Painter coming up this season. So I feel like the Phillies won't resign. They know their rotation's good. So I think the Mets will be a good fit for him.
Yeah, I can't even imagine watching Ranger Suarez in a Mets jersey. That just makes me want to vomit, bro, because he's so good and watching him play. But I also do have him leaving. The main reason is he hired Scott Boras, like I mentioned in a video that I mentioned in a lot of videos whenever we talk baseball, that Scott Boras is his agent, who's also Bryce Harper's agent, and he knows how to get his players played. So I think no matter where he goes, he's going to get a lengthy 7-8 year contract, close to $150 million total. And I just think the Astros honestly make the most sense for him. I think he'd be great there. He could be one of their top line or even their best pitcher. They have a bunch of young pitchers in there, so he'd fit the timeline of there. Just overall, I think he's going to price himself out of Philly, and no matter where he goes, I think he's going to make his impact. So, but then I'm going to move over to another lefty who we both have going to the Baltimore Orioles. Let me hear your reasoning why you have Framber Valdez joining Baltimore.
I think he's not going to stay with Houston. He's been there majority of his career. And I just think a new fit will be good for Valdez going. And the O's struggled pitching this season. The O's were supposed to be this big team. They were good last season, playoffs, but now this year they kind of collapsed. What do? You preset. You go to what was your main cause? Pitching. So I think he will go there and, again, be their ace. Be their 1 or 2 guy to go out there and get you tough wins against heavily favored teams like the Phillies, Yankees, Dodgers.
Yeah, and I like how you mentioned that they had a historic collapse compared to the last 2 years. The main reason why they lost Corbin Burns, who was their best pitcher. They just let him go for nothing. He signed with the Diamondbacks, and they just let the major void. They were throwing out Zach Eflin, Charlie Morton, these guys who aren't top-line pitchers in the MLB, and I think Framber Valdez is that guy they exactly need to maybe get back to where they want to do, because they had back-to-back 100-win season, or 190 wins, and they got knocked out in the wild card both rounds. So just getting that foundation that helps you get back to their winning ways, get that back into the system, and Framber Valdez, I think would be great for them, and it just makes a lot of sense. They can give him a good contract that he probably wants, and he could be their top-line pitcher to help, and then hopefully help reset the culture there and have a good baseball team going forward. But then we're going to talk about Shota Imanaga. You have him signing with the Boston Red Sox. So what's your reasoning with that?
It's going to be my same reasoning why I have Dylan Cease going to the Red Sox. I feel like they're a young core. We saw that. We were surprised how close they kept it with the Yanks in the wild card round. But they're young. They need something. And I think Imanaga or Cease will give that young core more time to run up the score earlier in games.
Yeah. No, I think Imanaga and Boston would be great because they already traded for Garrett Crochet last year, and he was absolutely incredible for them. So bringing in another lefty in Imanaga, I think would be great. But I'm telling you, man, it's these Japanese players. I'm surprised he didn't go the first time around. I have Imanaga going to the Dodgers. I just think he's going to go into that rotation. They're always injury heavy, so Imanaga, guy who's been healthy so far ever since coming over to the MLB. I think he would fit perfect into that Dodgers rotation, and I just think it would make a lot of sense for him and for the Dodgers as a whole. Because with the Dodgers, they could win the World Series, and they're still looking to get better. It's that simple with them. That's the philosophy they built in LA. So, but then we just mentioned him, Dylan Cease. I agree with you going to the Boston Red Sox. I just think he'd be great. I think it would be amazing if Boston was able to get Cease and Imanaga. But that righty in that rotation, I think Cease would be great. I think he could kind of do what they wanted Lucas Giolito to do for them, had that kind of guy would be even better because Dylan Cease is just north of 30 years old. He was all right with the Padres, but if they could get anything of what he was with the White Sox, that could do wonders for them and their team as a whole. So, but then we're going to move on to our final two free agents. We'll talk about Edwin Diaz. You have him returning to the Mets, and your final piece going to the Mets. Why do you have him returning?
I have him returning because their bullpen struggled later in the year, and so if you go against and get one of your main guys who's always been there and like always consistent for you, I should say, coming in the later years, he brings the energy with trumpets every time he comes out. So you just got the whole stadium going. You had the light show, and you could feel like the change in pace.
Yeah, for sure. And you could see it after the World Baseball Classic when he got hurt and wasn't with them for that period of time. It really hurt their bullpen and their team as a whole. And I think he's built his legacy in New York and stuff like that. But the reason I have him going to the Dodgers is the same reason is why you have him staying with the Mets. They had no real closer last year. It even came to the point in the postseason they had to throw in Roki Sasaki, and he was their closer in the postseason. Obviously, he played well in that role, but for how much they paid him, they rather have him as a starter rather than a reliever. And Edwin Diaz, like I said, the Dodgers, they don't stay with what they have. They try to get better no matter what they can do. And I think Edwin Diaz to the Dodgers makes a lot of sense. Get that closer in that position, and they could really be set up. But then finally, we're going to talk about, obviously, I think the biggest free agent in this class, the guy who is probably going to get the most amount of money, Kyle Tucker. You have him signing with the Philadelphia Phillies. Why?
New face. I think Kyle Tucker embodies Philadelphia. I felt like he's just going to give this team that push to get over the hump and maybe go back to the World Series, go back to that championship series, which has been lacking the past few seasons. Kyle Tucker was a great bat, especially come later down the line and into the playoffs. I feel like he is what the Phillies needed, especially in that Dodgers series where they couldn't hit a ball. Kyle Tucker shows he can come up big in big moments.
Yeah, I think he'd be great in Philly. I think for him and for Phillies, I just keep using this word. It would make sense for both parties. But I'm just gonna. I know this is like a really great strain of me talking about 3 straight players going to the Dodgers. They're gonna try to go find a way to get him one way or another. The Dodgers always have money coming out of their ass. It's insane how much money they can throw at these players. And I just think they're at least going to throw a contract at Kyle Tucker. If they sign him, that'd be even more insane. But I just have him going to the Dodgers. I think it'd make the most sense. But then, like you said with the Phillies, I think it's either Kyle Tucker or Alex Bregman. I just went with Alex Bregman. So, but
you just want to see boom out of Philly.
Exactly. I think I'm not the only one with that same reasoning. So, but this is going to wrap up all of our predictions and stuff like that. Joe, is there any other player that we didn't mention that you are really looking at in either the trade market or just free agency as a whole?
There's always going to be those players that you never know it's going to happen in these times. I think there's going to be a lot more hard truths to face, especially in the Phillies organization with Bohm and Castellanos this season. But there's not real. I think we hit all the big name targets in every position.
Yeah, I think it's definitely going to be a good off season. I think this off season will set up things for years to come. Just depending on what some of the type of the players that are in this class. It's towards the younger, if you really think about it. Like it's in the range of like 25 and 30 years old. Most of these guys who are going to get signed to either go back to their teams or sign with new teams. And I just think overall, I think. Kyle Tucker, I think, will set the stage like Juan Soto and Shohei Ohtani did for the rest of the offseason. I think everything will just flow as they go, I think, in a sense. But before we wrap things up, Joe, you just want to give a preview of what we could possibly be doing in the future or just what to expect?
Well, what to expect is obviously Eagles play Monday night. Give our projections on that on Monday. Then obviously Flyers, Sixers recaps, which we try to give you like every other week, just to give you a full breakdown on our minds and where we think their season's going.
Yeah, I think I think that's pretty much he summed it up perfectly. Like the Flyers and Sixers, their seasons towards the bigger end. Obviously, the MLB is the biggest, but now we're in their dead period. Like their free agency, that's the biggest things going on. So we'll update you guys with breaking news and such when we do that. But then with like the NFL, Eagles have a big game this weekend against the Packers against the Packers, on Monday night. So coming out of the bye week, we're excited to see what they're going to show us. So we'll have that with you guys, like you said, and then the NBA and the NHL as the season flows. We'll update you guys when we can. But other than that, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. We will talk to you guys later. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and hopefully this free agency class is as crazy as we think it's going to be. So, but see you guys.